Here is an episode from the book Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. In the book, a sequel to Carroll's masterpiece, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Alice steps through a mirror into a curious and fantastic world. In her travels, she gets involved in a giant chess game. Along the way, she meets a number of interesting characters, including this well-known figure of nursery rhyme fame. Alice Meets Humpty Dumpty by Lewis Carroll. The egg got larger and larger, and more human. When she had come within a few yards of it, she saw that it had eyes and a nose and a mouth. And when she had come close to it, she saw clearly that it was Humpty Dumpty himself. "It can't be anybody else," she said to herself. "I'm as certain of it as if his name were written all over his face." Humpty Dumpty was sitting with his legs crossed, like a Turk, on the top of a high wall, such a narrow one that Alice quite wondered how he could keep his balance. And as his eyes were steadily fixed in the opposite direction, and he didn't take the least notice of her, she thought he must be a stuffed figure after all. "And how exactly like an egg he is," she said aloud, standing with her hands ready to catch him, for she was every moment expecting him to fall. "It's very provoking," Humpty Dumpty said after a long silence, looking away from Alice as he spoke, "to be called an egg. Very." "I said you looked like an egg, sir," Alice gently explained. "And some eggs are very pretty, you know," she added, hoping to turn her remark into a sort of compliment. "Some people," said Humpty Dumpty, looking away from her as usual, "have no more sense than a baby." Alice didn't know what to say to this. It wasn't at all like conversation, she thought, as he never said anything to her. In fact, his last remark was evidently addressed to a tree. So she stood and softly repeated to herself, "Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty in his place again." "That last line is much too long for the poetry," she added, almost out loud, forgetting that Humpty Dumpty would hear her. "Don't stand chattering to yourself like that," Humpty Dumpty said, looking at her for the first time, "but tell me your name and your business." "My name is Alice, but—" "It's a stupid name enough," Humpty Dumpty interrupted impatiently. "What does it mean?" "Must a name mean something?" Alice asked. "Of course it must," Humpty Dumpty said with a short laugh. "My name means the shape I am, and a good handsome shape it is too. With a name like yours, you might be any shape almost." "Why do you sit out here all alone?" said Alice, not wishing to begin an argument. "Why, because there's nobody with me," cried Humpty Dumpty. "Did you think I didn't know the answer to that? Ask another." "Don't you think you'd be safer down on the ground?" Alice went on, not with any idea of making another riddle, but simply in her good-natured anxiety for the queer creature. "That wall is so very narrow." "What tremendously easy riddles you ask," Humpty Dumpty growled out. "Of course I don't think so. Why, if I ever did fall off, which there's no chance of, but if I did—" Here he pursed up his lips and looked so solemn and grand that Alice could hardly help laughing. "If I did fall," he went on, "the king has promised me— you may turn pale if you like— the king has promised me with his very own mouth to—" "To send all his horses and all his men," Alice interrupted rather unwisely. "Now, I declare that's too bad," Humpty Dumpty cried, breaking into a sudden passion. "You've been listening at doors and behind trees and down chimneys, or you couldn't have known it." "I haven't indeed," Alice said very gently. "It's in a book." "Ah, well, they may write such things in a book," Humpty Dumpty said in a calmer tone. "That's what you call a history of England, that is. Now, take a good look at me. I'm one that has spoken to a king, I am. Mayhap you'll never see such another, and to show you I'm not proud, you may shake hands with me." And he grinned almost from ear to ear as he leant forward, and, as nearly as possible, fell off the wall in doing so, and offered Alice his hand. She watched him a little anxiously as she took it. If he smiled much more, the ends of his mouth might meet behind, she thought, and then I don't know what would happen to his head. I'm afraid it would come off. "Yes, all of his horses and all his men," Humpty Dumpty went on. "They'd pick me up again in a minute, they would. However, this conversation is going on a little too fast. Let's go back to the last remark but one." "I'm afraid I can't quite remember it," Alice said very politely. In that case, we start fresh," said Humpty Dumpty, "and it's my turn to choose a subject." "He talks about it just as if it was a game," thought Alice. "So here's a question for you. How old did you say you were?" Alice made a short calculation and said, 7 years and 6 months. "Wrong," Humpty Dumpty exclaimed triumphantly. "You never said a word like it." "I thought you meant how old are you?" Alice explained. "If I'd meant that, I'd have said it," said he. Alice didn't want to begin another argument, so she said nothing. 7 years and 6 months, Humpty Dumpty repeated thoughtfully. "An uncomfortable sort of age. Now, if you'd asked my advice, I'd have said, leave off at 7, but it's too late now." "I never ask advice about growing," Alice said indignantly. "Too proud?" the other inquired. Alice felt even more indignant at this suggestion. "I mean," she said, "that one can't help growing older." "One can't, perhaps," said Humpty Dumpty, "but 2 can. With proper assistance, you might have left off at 7. "What a beautiful belt you've got on," Alice suddenly remarked. They had had quite enough of the subject of age, she thought, and if they really were to take turns in choosing subjects, it was her turn now. At least, she corrected herself on second thoughts. "A beautiful cravat, I should have said. No, a belt. I beg your pardon," she added in dismay, for Humpty Dumpty looked thoroughly offended, and she began to wish she hadn't chosen that subject. "If only I knew," she thought to herself, "which was his neck and which was his waist." Evidently, Humpty Dumpty was very angry, though he said nothing for a minute or two. When he did speak again, it was in a deep growl. "It is a most provoking thing," he said at last, "when a person doesn't know a cravat from a belt." "I know it's very ignorant of me," Alice said in so humble a tone that Humpty Dumpty relented. "It's a cravat, child, and a beautiful one, as you say. It's a present from the White King and Queen." "Is it really?" said Alice, quite pleased to find that she had chosen a good subject after all. "They gave it me," Humpty Dumpty continued thoughtfully as he crossed one knee over the other and clasped his hands round it. "They gave it me for an unbirthday present." "I beg your pardon?" Alice said with a puzzled air. "I'm not offended," said Humpty Dumpty. "I mean, what is an unbirthday present?" "A present given when it isn't your birthday, of course," Humpty Dumpty answered. Alice considered a little. "I like birthday presents best," she said at last. "You don't know what you're talking about," cried Humpty Dumpty. "How many days are there in a year?" 365, said Alice. "And how many birthdays have you?" 1. And if you take 1 from 365, what remains? 364, of course. Humpty Dumpty looked doubtful. "I'd rather see that done on paper," he said. Alice couldn't help smiling as she took out her memorandum book and worked the sum for him. 365 minus 1 is 364. Humpty Dumpty took the book and looked at it carefully. "That seems to be done right," he began. "You're holding it upside down," Alice interrupted. "To be sure I was," Humpty Dumpty said gaily as she turned it round for him. "I thought it looked a little queer. As I was saying, that seems to be done right, though I haven't time to look it over thoroughly just now. And that shows there are 364 days when you might get unbirthday presents, and only one for birthday presents, you know.